I didn't hear it from my wife first. That part still lingers with me. A colleague mentioned it casually during lunch, scrolling through his phone while we waited for our order. Big news in your house, huh? VP already. Celebration this weekend. I smiled automatically, the way people do when they're expected to know what's being discussed. Yeah, I said. But I hadn't heard anything about a celebration. When I got home that evening, the apartment felt normal, quiet, tidy, the faint smell of the jasmine candle my wife liked to burn after work. She was sitting at the dining table with her laptop open, typing quickly. Hey, I said. Hey, she answered without looking up. I waited. Eventually she closed the laptop and stretched. They finalized it today, she said. Vice President. I congratulated her. I meant it. She had worked hard for it, long nights, constant travel, the kind of relentless ambition that impressed people in boardrooms. Then she said, almost as an afterthought, my parents are organizing a celebration dinner this weekend. I nodded. They invited some close family and a few people from the old days. Something in the way she said old days made me pause. And, I asked. She hesitated for half a second. They thought it might be simpler if you didn't come. There wasn't a dramatic silence. No shouting, just a small shift in the air. Why? I asked. She rubbed her temples. My parents still like Daniel. They've stayed in touch with him since before we got married. They think it'll be awkward. Daniel, her ex. The one her parents had always believed she should have married. They just want the evening to be comfortable, she said. It's not a big deal. I nodded slowly. Of course, I said. She looked relieved. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of anger, at least not at first. My mind kept replaying small moments from the past few years. Her mother introducing me once at a gathering as Hannah's husband, without remembering my name. Her father asking Daniel for business advice during a holiday dinner while barely acknowledging my presence. The quiet assumption that I existed somewhere on the edge of their family picture. Each memory was harmless on its own. Together they felt like arithmetic. Something that added up to an answer I hadn't wanted to calculate. The next morning I started packing, not dramatically. Just a suitcase. Then a small box. I took things that were clearly mine, books, a few framed photos from before the marriage, my laptop equipment. The apartment looked almost the same when I finished. You wouldn't notice anything missing unless you lived there. Which, I realized, was exactly the point. Saturday evening arrived. I imagined the celebration unfolding downtown at one of those polished hotel venues companies like to use for milestone events. White tablecloths, soft lighting, people shaking hands and praising her leadership. I wasn't angry about her success, but I couldn't ignore the fact that the person who had stood beside her through the worst parts of the climb wasn't welcome at the top. Around 8 o'clock my phone began buzzing with notifications. Coworkers posting congratulations, photos of the stage, a video clip of her accepting applause. None of them mentioned me. Not intentionally. Just absence. By 9 o'clock I closed my suitcase. I left the apartment key on the kitchen counter. Then I walked out. Not dramatically. Just quietly enough that the hallway light clicked off behind me. What no one at that celebration knew was that my professional life overlapped with hers more than most people realized. Not through her company directly, but through a strategic consulting project my firm had been handling for the same corporate group that owned several of their subsidiaries. The project was scheduled to expand next quarter. My name had already been attached to the planning phase. At about the same time the celebration was winding down, an executive meeting was happening in another room of the hotel. My phone rang as I stepped outside into the cool night air. It was Martin, one of the senior directors involved in the project. Where are you tonight? He asked. On the road, I said. Pause. Your name came up in the planning session, he continued. They assumed you'd be leading the expansion. I won't be, I said calmly. Another pause. That's unexpected. I've decided to step away from the partnership. Martin exhaled slowly. Are you sure? It changes a lot of things. I know. He didn't ask why. Professional people rarely do. But I knew that somewhere inside that hotel, conversations were beginning to shift. Not dramatically. Just enough for people to realize that someone they had treated as invisible was quietly connected to the structure they were celebrating. I didn't sabotage anything. I simply removed myself. Around midnight my wife called. I didn't answer. Instead I kept driving. 2 hours later she walked into the apartment expecting a confrontation. At least that's what she told me later. Instead she found the kitchen exactly as I had left it. Neat, organized, a single envelope on the counter. Inside was a short letter, no accusations, no anger. Just a simple explanation. I wrote that I was proud of her achievement. But I couldn't stay in a place where my presence had to be negotiated. Respect, I explained, wasn't something you should have to compete for at your own table. The next few days passed quietly. She called several times. I responded politely but briefly. Meanwhile, the professional consequences unfolded in slow, formal ways. Meetings were rescheduled. The project leadership changed. Nothing dramatic, just adjustments. My life moved forward in a different direction. Months later, someone asked me if leaving during the celebration had been revenge. I thought about it. It hadn't felt like revenge. Revenge requires an audience. What I did felt more like stepping out of a room where everyone had already decided you didn't belong. The strange thing is that once you leave a room like that, you realize something simple. The door had never been locked. You just stayed too long trying to be invited.